Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about productivity improvement. And as everybody's probably interested in productivity improvement, and that's why they're on this webinar, is to hear and see how they can improve the productivity of their staffs. And I just wanted to give you a little update about what's happening in our retail world today. Of the 2,000 major malls that are left in the United States today, they say that another 400 of those are going to be closing in the next few years. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, there was over 4,000 major malls in the United States. Today there's 2,000 major malls, and they're saying 400 more of those are going to be closing soon. The Limited has closed all 250 of their stores. Sports Authority closed all their stores. Aeropostale's closing stores. American Eagle closing stores. Chico's, Children's Place, Finish Line, Hancock Fabrics, Men's Warehouse, Macy's, Sears, Penney's, Mervyn's. They're all closing stores. The Jewelers Board of Trade, the JBT, reported that 1,669 jewelry businesses closed in 2016. And In-Store magazine just reported that 817 jewelry retailers closed their doors in 2017. So what does that mean? Well, I think it means a couple things. That retail is changing at a very dramatic pace. And I also believe that with many of these retailers closing their doors, that there's probably going to be a lot of good retail people available out in the world today. So we've got to do a better job of recruiting and bringing people on board and giving them the training and the knowledge and the skills that they need in order to be successful. And I find I have 5 what I call keys to productivity improvement. And those 5 keys are, number 1, training and coaching. Number 2, we've got to have an accountability structure. Number 3, we have to set up goals and objectives. Number 4, we have to have non-negotiable standards. And number 5, we have to have a training process. And I think the number 1 thing that people want out of their jobs is the ability to be and or feel successful. And what's the number 1 thing that's going to give people the ability to be and or feel successful? And I think that's our responsibility as owners and managers, is to provide the training that they need in order to be successful. And I'm constantly hearing people saying, well, my people aren't motivated, or they're just not doing it. I always ask, well, what do you mean they're not doing it? What is it? They're not doing it. Well, I train them and I train them and I train them, and they're just not doing it. And that's probably because we're training just to talk and not necessarily training for retention. And that's where the sales training app that we've developed comes into play, is that we need to train our people not only to give them the knowledge and the information, but to get them to retain it and actually use it on the sales floor where it counts. And we got to get our people building better relationships with our customers, simply because it's a known fact that 60 to 65% of your business comes from 25 to 30% of the customer base. So it just makes sense that we need to look at ways that we can increase our customer base. And what they're not publishing is they're losing about 25 to 30% of our customer base on an annual basis. Where are they going? Maybe they go to the competition. Maybe they go to the internet. Maybe they no longer need our products and their services. Maybe they reach an age where they're giving their stuff away. They're not buying new stuff. Maybe they just pass away. But the fact is they're going somewhere. So we've got to get our people trained on how they can build better relationships. So, as I said, the 5 silver bullets are, number 1, training and coaching. Number 2, accountability. Number 3, setting up goals and objectives. And number 4, setting up non-negotiable sales and customer service standards. So let me tell you how the training app comes into play where it comes to these things. So we've got some challenges where it comes to training. Our associates are busy, and they have a limited amount of time, and they put customers as the priority, which they absolutely should. So we have a solution where they can do the training at any time they want to, whether it be before the store opens, sitting at the in the break table on a break or on a lunch break, or doing it after work. And they're real short, quick, memorable lessons that people can view at their own leisure whenever they want to. The new information is very easy to forget, and that's where we have to follow the 5 criteria for training, is that they have to hear it, they have to read it, they got to write it, they have to role play it, and they have to be observed doing it. So we've covered 3 out of those 5 criteria, and it's up to you as the owner-manager to fulfill the other 2 criteria of role-playing it and then actually observing them doing it and reinforcing it. So every lesson, there's quizzes after each lesson, and they are given points based on how fast they answer the questions and based on whether they get the question correct or not, of course. And it's difficult to measure the effectiveness of the training. So we put in a measurement process for what I call the KPIs, key productivity indicators, where we can actually track people's productivity, give them and assign them points that you can see and that you can measure and that you can assign rewards to. And, this sounds a little egotistical, but Brad, you can't be in the store every day. And some of you I've worked with in stores, some of you I haven't. But the fact of the matter is that my goal every time I go into a company is to replace myself with somebody internally. But if that can't be done, then we need to have the resource by which we can actually offer people the training process, as we've talked about. So we're bringing you the training process via a mobile device, which is their app or their telephone or their laptop or whatever the case may be. So in the next slide, we talk about the forgetting curve. And you've all heard the term knowledge is power, knowledge is power, knowledge is power. Well, I don't believe that. I think it's the use of knowledge that gets you power. Because I know a lot of very smart, broke people that don't use their God-given talents. I know a lot of people that train their staff, and then they don't actually train them for retention, and then the training just seems to go away. So we have to have a consistent, ongoing process to where they actually retain the information and use it, and that's one of the things that the training app provides for you, is it's aligned the learning and performance. We're chunking the content together. We provide retrieval practice, and we give spaced repetitions. So we make sure that the people are retaining the information that we're teaching them as well. So on the next slide, we talk a little bit about how the system works. It's all web-based, and they can access it via their iPhone or their telephone, their tablet, their laptop, their desktop, whatever device they have that they can download and watch the training on. They get a new chapter every week, every month. So every month there's a new chapter, and within each chapter there's 4 lessons. So a chapter can last for 4 weeks, or it can last the entire month. You can give it to them 1 week at a time, or they can do it all at one time, depending on how fast they want to go and whether they retain it or not. Each person is given an individual user account so they can log into and log out of their account and review the information as often as they want to. And like I said about the quizzes, we assign them points based on kind of like a Trivial Pursuit game that you play at the bar. They get points assigned based on whether they answer the questions correctly or not and at the speed at which they answer those questions. And then we have a monthly leaderboard where the owner or the manager, whoever, can actually look at how each individual is doing on the leaderboard and whether people are using it or not using it. And it kind of increases the competition to where they can see where they stand and how others that they're working with are actually doing. So we've got a reporting system as well to report the data back to you, and so you know what the most widely missed questions are and where you need to go back and retrain them or refocus and have them watch the information again. So on the next slide, this is a little bit how it works. And I'm going to let Michelle tell you a little bit how it works because she's actually the guru on this whole thing and responsible for putting it together. And you may recognize it, but it's actually her voice on the training. So, Michelle, you want to take it away?
Sure. I switch on over to the app here. So, hi, everybody. As Brad mentioned, this is web-based. So, rather than having to download something from the App Store, they can put it on their phone by going through Safari or going through Chrome and adding it to their desktop. They get an individual login. This helps in a couple of ways. One, it's going to allow you to add new users or remove users as they leave your organization. And 2, most importantly, it's going to allow you to track their performance individually. So if somebody's getting online, and you'll be able to know if they're not getting online, if they're not participating properly, you can know that also. And then it also is what gives us the ability to track their individual performance and develop that leaderboard. So once they have logged in, this is our very basic home screen. We want to make it as easy as possible. You're looking at the laptop version of this right now. It is responsive mobile design. So if you're looking at it on a tablet or if you're looking at it on a smartphone, the way this design comes up is optimized for your screen. So you'll see more buttons and vertical page if you're on a smartphone, for example. You've got a couple options here, current quiz and quiz archive. We'll go back to the quiz archive in a moment, but the current quiz is going to give you, as Brad mentioned, your monthly chapter that you're on. When you first enter the system, you start on chapter 1. We'll go past the instructions here. You start out on chapter 1. If you finish chapter 1 in the first month, and by finishing, we mean going through all of these videos and then receiving a 75% or higher score on each of the quizzes, or each of the individual section quizzes here. If you do all of that within that first month, then when you move to the second month, you get to chapter 2, or the second month of content. The sooner you finish those during a month, the more eligible you are for bonus questions, extra credit questions throughout the month that'll accumulate on your leaderboard, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But we really do want to provide an incentive for your retailers or for your associates, for your sales managers, to hop into the system as quickly as possible in the month, absorb the materials, and then we give them, again, the opportunity to continue to review them, take the test throughout the month. They can take the test multiple times if they don't pass it the first time, and to be able to engage with your content repeatedly throughout the month. So here we have for chapter 1, lesson 1, just a quick example, and I won't play the whole thing, but they can click play. They're being fed through YouTube, so we've got broadband that's going to be passing those through. You may hear the sound here in just a moment. And again, so for example, this video here is about 2 minutes.
Product or service based on the customer's wants and needs with integrity. Good salespeople cause things to happen. They will cause customers to think of them as their friend in the industry. They will cause them to make a purchase, to buy additional items, to give referrals and recommendations. They will cause one-time customers to become repeat customers, or even their own personal trade customers.
So again, we keep these individual lessons down to about 2 to 3 minutes. The main reason we do that is we know that in a busy retail environment, the customer is always going to be the top priority. We don't want the system to either be something that gets in the way of your team's interactions with their customers, or something that ends up leaving them frustrated, that maybe they've gotten halfway through a longer lesson, have to leave and come back to it, forget where they were, spend a lot of time. We really want to make it as digestible as possible and then easy to remember. So then they go to their 2 or 3 minute video. Once they're done, answer the questions. You'll notice here we do have that countdown timer that Brad was talking about, and we'll get the question. So selling integrity sets you apart. A little white light doesn't hurt anything, causes people to trust and respect you. I think this one is A and C. And that's correct. So this is going to loop you through 5 questions. And each one of those, you're going to get a score at the end of this test to see how many points that you got on your leaderboard based on how quickly you answered. We have the timer on there for 2 different reasons. One, because we do have the leaderboard, which we'll take a look at in just a minute. We want there to be a way of differentiating so you can see who's kind of rising to the top and who's falling toward the bottom, really to make it more fun and more competitive and more engaging. But secondly, on the psychological level, there are studies that indicate that the more quickly that people are able to read, engage with a question, and answer it are a higher indication of their level of mastery of that material. So we really want to put some pressure on them, use some friendly pressure to be able to get them to engage, to understand it, to really truly test what their knowledge is of the material. Again, if they don't pass the test, they can take it an unlimited number of times throughout the month to try to pass it again. We really want to make sure, and the questions aren't terribly difficult. It's much more about making sure they're retaining the information and able to use it than it is about being tricky or frustrating. So once you've finished that, you would then go on to lesson 2, watch that video, answer those questions. And then, as I mentioned, once you get all of this done with a 75% score or higher in that month, they'll then be eligible for their extra credit. So let's say you've got an associate who finishes their quiz, or all their quizzes for the whole section for the whole month in that first week. The second week of the month, they're going to get an email that invites them to take a couple of extra credit questions. They'll go to this page and they'll see their extra credit questions in here. So we can click, in order to establish trust, I need to use good communication skills, listen to my customers, sell the store, all of the above. They'll click it, and then that gives them extra credit. They can click continue to get to the next question. In this aforementioned leaderboard, I'm in as a test account right now, so there's not a lot of robust data in here, but you'll see the name of the associate or manager, and you'll see the number of points they have for the month. I can show you really quickly an example of when you've got more information or more folks that are listed on there, you've got it on a mobile device and you've got more points that have been established. This is just an example screen of one of the test accounts that we've got running. The importance of the leaderboard and us renewing it every month is to make sure that nobody gets too frustrated. If somebody gets too far behind, let's say if you do this over the course of a year, then people are going to drop out, and you really don't want that to happen. You want them to stay engaged. You want to give them a new chance each month to be able to perform and participate. And in doing so, you can decide internally if you want to tie incentives to the top performers in your store to add a little bit of additional incentive, or you can simply let the nature of competition, let them compete against each other and engage in the system. One of the other items with the leaderboard, and we'll see that here with my points, you see these are listed as weekly test quiz points, weekly test quiz points. Brad touched on it a bit, and to go a little bit more into detail, and Brad, I may ask you to jump in on the types here. We also have the ability for you to provide us your actual store sales data by associate. So we can assign points, additional points to show up on the leaderboard based on their sales performance or their sales activity. And Brad, do you want to talk just a moment about some of the measures that we can include in here?
Yeah, the KPIs, the key performance indicators that we're going to start with are sales to goal, of course, their add-ons as a dollar percentage of total sales, and then their closing ratio. And I think that's a great place to start in tracking people's productivity, because that's the biggest, or what I see is the low-hanging fruit in most retail stores I go into. If we can increase, well, the industry average closing ratio is about 20%. And if we can increase your closing ratio to 30%, we just had ourselves a nice 50% increase in sales. And traditionally, with add-ons traditionally are running about 3 to 5% in most retail stores. In other words, the salespeople are so happy to make a sale, they run like heck at the register without stopping to add on. And I think add-ons is a huge area for growth, because I've seen stores jump up as high as 30, 35, 40% in add-ons. So you never know. There might be a 25, 30, 35% sales increase just waiting for somebody to take it based on training our staff on how to add on and how to increase their closing ratio. And mainly, it's just through selling based on the reasons customers want to buy and through asking people to buy things, because too often they're just not doing that. So we track those numbers, and I find that people will improve what you inspect, not what you expect. So once you start tracking it, it will naturally increase. Then once we track it and we train them on it, then the results that we get will be just phenomenal.
Thank you, Brad. Yep, and so as we mentioned, we provide a form for you to be able to give us that data. We'll load that up for you either on a weekly or a monthly basis, so those will show up and provide that incentive there for you. Reporting, if you're a sales manager, you'll get a list of each of the individuals, and this is a test account, but you'd actually be able to click on these and see what that breakdown was of points for each of those individual users, much like what they're seeing on their My Points page. But more importantly, we can also provide you some custom reports, such as the most recent or the most often missed questions, or if you've got an underperformer in your store, to give you a little bit of an insight on what they're struggling on. We find that with the feedback loop really of training and understanding how everybody's doing, it's an additional tool for you to understand where the focus and emphasis needs to be, maybe on where the next role-playing exercise needs to come from, or really what needs to be emphasized in the weekly sales meeting. Any of that feedback can let you know how on individual and store-wide level everybody's performing. Is going to give you a better insight into why you are or aren't making the numbers that you're expecting. And then, of course, we have a regular change password and our logout features that you would expect. And one other one here, I've got another account that is on a different chapter. So we showed you here that if somebody's on this user's on chapter 3, so they're able to get into their chapter 1 and their chapter 2 content still. So this is important for, let's say you've noticed that somebody maybe isn't excelling the way that you would want them to on add-on sales. You can send them back to the add-ons chapter so they can watch any of those videos, and then the questions have already been answered, so they don't get the questions at this point, but they do get those among the extra credit questions. The extra credit questions are on that month and any of the previous month's content. Also important with this, and just to kind of make the distinction of how these work, the subscriptions that Brad's going to talk about, that includes all of the associates and managers within your store, within a store location. So if you have, let's say you have somebody, you start the program in April, and then you have a new associate that you hire in May, and maybe a new manager that you hire in June. Everybody who onboards onto the program is going to start on chapter 1, and then they can progress. But each of the chapters has the same number of questions and content available. So you don't have to worry about it being unfair that one person's on chapter 3 and somebody else is on chapter 1. They have the same content, same amount of points available. So they can still all stay relatively competitive with each other on the leaderboard. It's still fun for everybody store-wide, but you're making sure that that content is tailored to where they are in that learning or the process of their experience with you in your store. And then, Brad, I will bring it. Does anybody have any questions about the demo or any of the functionality? Okay. Brad?
Well, how much is it? Well, that's always been a big question, and training is really, really expensive if, in fact, you don't use it. It is very inexpensive if you do use it. Again, studies have shown that a trained staff will produce, on average, about 35 to 45% more than an untrained staff person would. So I know you're thinking, well, what if I spend all this money and I train my staff and they leave? And my typical response is, well, what if you don't train your staff and then they stay? So either way, you're in a pickle, so to speak. And one thing that you need to keep in mind that I haven't mentioned on previous webinars, but anything that you do with us as far as training and development is a 100% tax deduction. So it virtually costs you nothing because the government will give you a write-off or a tax deduction for anything that you've spent on training and development. And further, most retailers traditionally don't have a line on their expense report for training and development of staff. Matter of fact, most people spend more on having their trash removed every month than they do on staff training. So here's the pricing structure. It's $249 a month if you sign up for just a month at a time. It's $229 per month if you make a 6-month commitment, plus we're going to give you 1 month free. Then if you sign up for a year commitment, it's $199 per month, and then we'll give you 2 months free. So as you can see, it costs very little, and if you have a staff of 10 people, we're talking about $20 per month per person. If they can't produce another 100, 200, 300, 500, 1,000, or 5,000 more just based on training them, then we're probably barking up the wrong tree here. But I know that a trained staff member will produce more than an untrained staff member. As I said at the outset, that the biggest frustration people have is their inability to be successful. Or the biggest thing they look for in their jobs is the ability to be and or feel successful. And if we're not giving them the knowledge and the training and the guidance and the leadership they need in order to be successful, then we're really failing our staffs, and we're failing ourselves and failing our store. So there you have it. Any questions that anybody has, Michelle and I would be more than happy to answer them. Or if you think any questions after this webinar is over, you can always email Michelle back, or you can email me, Brad at iastraining.com, and we'll get those questions answered for you.